Yes, yes, yes. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to one and all. Although for the purposes of this show, I'll say good evening because it is the Night Flight show. That's the theme. You know the routine. We chop it up about all sorts of different subjects. Whatever you guys want to get into. Obviously, bearing in mind, we're on YouTube, so the algorithm is a bit techie. But we'll try use innuendo, different words to talk about whatever subject, right? So I'd like to shout out everybody in the chat room. Let's just get a roll call here. Probably not the right way to describe it. Big up Mr. Luca, big up JR. That's right, do it. Jelly Mode. LD Phoenix, Set. Juan Rodriguez DeLuca, Fight Sport Talk, big up. We got Kayvon Green. We got Adam. Johnny Gaffer. Shout out to Johnny Gaffer. JDM, Ayed, Andrew, Joker, Marlo, Julius. Did I shout out Jelly Mode already? Funny Faces, Andrew, Tom, Pacer. Shadab. Big up, Bexy, Striker, BG London, Tawheed, G-Man, big up G-Man, every time. We got Cloud, we got Reflex, we got Leo, Marlo, yep, Copend. We got Warts, Hussein, Joe Williams, big up, big up, big up, big up. Marlo says, can we have some parliamentary procedure here? All right, before we get into non-boxing related stuff, there is a couple of boxing related things, and we could talk about boxing throughout the show. It's all good. But I do want to just touch on a couple of boxing topics here, just to kick things off. So, where are we at? So here we are. Chris Eubank Jr. has stuck to his word. Shout out to G-Man, by the way, because I saw his video regarding this. Then I went to Eubank Jr.'s Instagram page, and you can see he's posted a, post up with a screenshot of all this money that's gone out to the fighters who were supposed to be on the undercard of the original date for Eubank Jr. Conor Benn. And he wrote below, after my first scheduled bout with Conor Benn got cancelled, Eddie Hearn and Matchroom Boxing never compensated anyone for their training camps, which never sat well with me. So here's a little something to help out the undercard fighters that were left out of pocket. And in brackets, he says, a few boxers didn't want to give me their bank details. Maybe they will now. Why wouldn't they want to give him their bank details? Like, are they that paranoid, and are they that brainwashed about Eubank Jr.? Did they seriously think he would have, tried to commit fraud upon them or do something dodgy with their bank details? Like, come on. Come on. Or maybe they just dislike him that much that they don't want to take a penny off him. If you're sensible, unless you are a high-earning fighter, and most of them are not, then you'll take the damn money. You know what I mean? And as you can see, several fighters took the money. And I got to big up Eubank Jr. for being a man of his word. He paid out to Felix Cash, Harlem Eubank, Connor Coyle, Matty Harris, Mary Romero, Chloe Watson, S.J. Courtney, I guess that's Shannon Courtney, GY Boxing Limited, Ellie Scottney, Lyndon Arthur. They all got, $3.5 grand? Not bad. So big up Eubank Jr. for being a man of his word and doing what Conor Benn and Eddie Hearn really should have done, right? They should have been the ones compensating the fighters who were put out of pocket that didn't get to have their fights that were meant to be on the undercard. These guys are not earning millions. They weren't raised rich like Conor Benn, like Eddie Hearn. And of course, like Eubank Jr., but Eubank Jr. wasn't at fault for the original date of the fight falling through. He wasn't at fault for that. It was, of course, Conor Benn. He was at fault. And since that was Eddie Hearn's fighter, he has to have some culpability as well. So yeah, big up Eubank Jr. for being a man of his word and paying 50 grand collectively, obviously, to the fighters who were supposed to be on that original undercard. And that's on top of paying 100 grand fine. I know he's contesting the 100 grand fine, which is steep. And you know, the British Boxing Board of Control said that the money goes to the British Board's charity. Now, to me, that instantly rings alarm bells. I can't tell you that things are not on the up and up. I don't know. Okay, but anyone who knows anything about charities will know that a lot of them are dodgy. In fact, I might even want to say the majority of them could be construed as dodgy or at least not effective. Because if you actually look at the books, such as they are, of a lot of the charities, the majority of the money that gets paid to perhaps the majority of them, like I say, ends up paying for the staff, for their wages, for their travel costs, expenses, and only a small percentage actually goes to the people that it's supposed to go to, depending on what charity it is. Look it up. Yeah, I've known people, for example, that worked for Oxfam at a relatively high level, and they said it was like that there, where an enormous amount of money was going to staff. And that's where, I can't say with Oxfam specifically if that's where the majority of the donations were going, but it certainly made up for an enormous amount of where the donations were going, was paying staff and stuff like that, you know? And so when the British Boxing Board of Control say the money goes to their charity, who works for their charity? Do the board members work for their charity? What do they get as being members of that charity? Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm just asking loads of questions in my head when Robert Smith said that. If the money was donated to a different charity, I mean, he did say that the charity does certain things and helps boxers and this, that, and the other. Yeah, all charities profess to help people. But then they're paying staff members to fly around the world and putting them up in hotels and, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's what a lot of charities do, bro. In fact, Graham Hancock, before he started investigating and researching ancient cultures, he was like a mainstream journalist, right? Graham Hancock. And one of the first books that he wrote, look this up, was called Lords of Poverty. And Lords of Poverty was actually an expose of sorts on charities. Yeah, I think that's when he was working for, was it The Economist? Might have been when he was working for The Economist. He worked for a couple of mainstream papers, but one of them was definitely The Economist. And this would have been in the 1980s. He was working for one of the mainstream papers and he wrote that book, Lords of Poverty. Anyway, moving on from Eubank Jr. and the British board, and the very steep 100 grand fine. Shakur Stevenson put this tweet out. Excited about my next fight. It was a misunderstanding between Turkey and the team. My apologies on my part for overreacting. Let's work at Turkey Al-Sheikh. So, yeah, Shakur Stevenson with his tail between his legs. He's publicly apologized to Turkey Al-Sheikh. I guess they've smoothed things over or whatever the case may be. Or maybe not. Maybe somebody's leaned on Shakur Stevenson and said, you have to apologize or else, you know, there might be contractual problems for you. Who knows? But anyway, he's come out and apologized. And then we've got the announcement that Shakur Stevenson William Zepeda is happening July 12th on a Ring Magazine card in New York. Says there Shakur Stevenson will defend his WBC lightweight title versus William Zepeda on July 12th in New York. The Ring has learned the highly anticipated 135-pound title clash will be part of a Ring Magazine event that will celebrate the launch of a new television show called Inside the Ring. Now, interestingly, July 12th is the same date that the Usyk-Dubois rematch is rumored to be happening. Obviously in a different country, so, the shows won't clash. But still, interesting, right? July 12th. Potentially Usyk-Dubois too. It hasn't yet been confirmed by Frank Warren or Team Dubois or Team Usyk yet. But that's the reports that we were getting from The Ring and various other boxing publications, outlets and whatnot. So yeah, let me know what you guys think of this in the comments. Shakur Stevenson versus Zepeda. I said previously that Zepeda's had great preparation for Shakur Stevenson. He's had better preparation for Stevenson, in my opinion, than Stevenson has had for him, because Zepeda's coming off those 2 fights against Tevin Farmer. Now, Tevin Farmer isn't exactly like Shakur Stevenson, obviously, but he's similar. Southpaw, slick, etc., etc. So good prep for Zepeda. I mean, not that he looked amazing against Tevin Farmer. He had plenty of problems, especially in the first fight. But yeah, let me know what you guys think of this in the comments. We'll get to it. Also, Lawrence Okolie, I saw this video the other day. I'm not sure if it's a new video or if it was uploaded ages ago, but it's on the Queensbury YouTube channel. Lawrence Okolie said a long time ago that he was sparring Moses Itauma from when Itauma was like 15. And he said the hardest spar he's ever had in his life. Bear in mind, when this spar happened, Lawrence Okolie was a world champion. Okay? Moses Itauma was 15. And Okolie had sparred the likes of AJ. He went on to spar Tyson Fury, Daniel Dubois, etc., etc. And Okolie said Itauma gave him the hardest sparring he's ever had when he was only 15. Now, some people might take it as Okolie just, hyping up things and going overboard. Maybe he's friends with Itauma. Itauma's half Nigerian, Okolie's Nigerian. Maybe it's the Nigerian connection and he's just bigging up the young up-and-comer because they're friends. But then this video gets posted of them in the gym at the time. So this would have been, 5 years ago? This is a video from 5 years ago, folks, in the gym, which has only just got released now. So I can't imagine this is just hype because they're friends and all that type of stuff when he says that Itauma gave him the toughest spar he's ever had. Because there you see a 15-year-old Moses Itauma. And he fully looks 15. Man turned up to a pro gym in his school uniform to get in there and spar with a world champion in Lawrence Okolie. Folks, that's crazy. It is actually nuts. And obviously, there have been loads of fighters over the years who had bags of potential and they never fulfilled the potential. So, of course, we can't get too carried away with Itauma. But one thing I can say is that for a boy that young to be turning up sparring world champions and holding his own is not normal. I can assure you that is not normal. There might be some 15-year-olds who do spar world champions, but they're getting walked around the ring. They're not holding their own. Itauma, when he was 17, was sparring Daniel Dubois when Dubois was well into his pro career. And Dubois' own trainer, Shane McGuigan, said he could not believe how good Itauma was. I mean, so Itauma is definitely not a normal prospect. He's a prodigy. He's special. But obviously, that talent needs to be cultivated. He needs to keep his feet on the ground. And it's hard when there's people like me and people like Lawrence Okolie and many others singing his praises. It's hard, but he's going to have to keep his feet on the ground, maintain a level head. And he seems to be doing that right now. But he's going to have to keep doing that if he's going to fulfill the considerable potential that he appears to have. All right, so I do just want to direct you guys towards that video. Just go to the Queensbury YouTube channel and you'll see Lawrence Okolie in the gym with a 15-year-old Moses Italma, and he's singing his praises. He's like, I can't believe how good this kid is. We've just done sparring and this kid is the future. So yeah. And then other than that, it's just the Whitaker Cameron thing. They've agreed on 10 rounds. Now look, you guys know me. I don't trust any boxing promoter. And by the way, I'm going to come to your questions and comments in just a moment. If there's anybody that's super chatted, hold tight. I'll read your comments first. I'm just going to finish up with a little boxing stuff here. So, as you guys know, I don't trust any boxing promoter. Be that as it may, with this Frank Warren, Ben Shalom situation, all along, I've tended to suspect that Ben Shalom was actually telling the truth, and Frank Warren was the one who was being manipulative. Let's just put it that way. Because Frank Warren is such a seasoned vet, not only in terms of taking advantage of a mistake that Ben Shalom had made, but also knowing how to spin a narrative in the media to make Ben Shalom, who is a rival of his, look bad when actually things had been maybe sorted out behind the scenes. Now, some people would say, well, that can't be true because Liam Cameron himself was saying things hadn't been sorted out. But Liam Cameron might only know what Frank Warren was telling him. Do you know what I mean? He wouldn't necessarily be privy to everything that's going on between the two sides. Frank Warren might have been holding the... I'm not saying he was, okay? I'm just speculating here. But it's possible that somebody on that side might have been holding information back, you know? Or maybe Liam Cameron's in on the whole thing. But my opinion, as an outsider looking in with no inside knowledge on the situation, is that Ben Shalom was telling the truth. Somebody made a mistake there in his office with the contracts, putting 12 rounds rather than 10, because they had, I think, 2 or 3 other fights that they just made with Queensbury. So they were using a template contract, right? And the other fights were 12 rounds. So somebody didn't, amend or change or whatever the template to have 10 rounds on it rather than 12. And Frank Warren, being the veteran he is, jumped on it and used it to his advantage. And he and Cameron squeezed Ben Shalom for as much money as they could get out of him. Liam Cameron, I think, has since come out and said the extra money, correct me if I'm wrong here, but the extra money on top of the original agreed purse for this fight, the extra money alone was actually more than he got for the first fight in its entirety, the entire purse for the first fight. So squeezing Ben Shalom in the way that they did paid off nicely for Liam Cameron and Frank Warren, who obviously gets a cut of Liam Cameron's purse, right? He's his promoter. So there you go. That situation is sorted out anyway. I suspect it had been sorted out before Warren and Cameron admitted to it being sorted out. I just think that they were, or Frank Warren anyway, was trying to drag Ben Shalom's name through the mud a little bit because he likes doing that kind of thing. I mean, Frank Warren, I've always had the impression, loves the cut and thrust and the cutthroat nature of the boxing business. He likes getting into confrontations with other promoters. He likes all that kind of stuff, in my opinion. It makes him feel alive. It gives him an adrenaline rush. I was going to say something else for a second, right? You guys know where I was going. But yeah, it makes him feel alive. That's the impression I've always got. He likes all the beef. So, yeah, there's that. Okay, so let's turn it back over to the chat room. We got some super chats here, which I will read now. Shout out to the Sweet Maths for the super chat. He says, Hatman, I'm too young to remember the Mike Tyson era. Who is the biggest star at their peak, Mike Tyson or Floyd Mayweather? Mike Tyson by a mile. By an absolute mile. Yeah, it wasn't even close. Mike Tyson was way, 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 way bigger at his peak than Floyd Mayweather. Floyd Mayweather although he did big numbers, right? Because he worked out a formula with Al Heyman to exploit certain demographics and get people to hate him so much that people would tune in and so on and so forth. But he was never a household name in many countries across the world the way that Mike Tyson was. In fact, in the UK, I'm telling you, a lot of people that weren't big boxing fans didn't even know Floyd Mayweather. You could have spoken to like female family members who were maybe older. They wouldn't have known who Floyd Mayweather was. But I'm telling you, back in the 80s, everybody knew Mike Tyson. Old ladies knew who Mike Tyson was. Yeah, you know what I mean? Because there were far fewer channels back then, right? Television stations. And Mike Tyson fights were such big events that on the news, right? Sometimes even before the sports section towards the end of a news program, they would report on Mike Tyson fights. Sometimes at the beginning of a news program, they would give you the headlines before going into the actual stories. And for some of Mike Tyson's fights, he made the headlines. He hit the results of his fights, and also some stuff that went on in his personal life was announced at the start of a news program as one of the main headlines. Do you know what I mean? Mike Tyson was huge, absolutely huge in the 1980s, way bigger than Floyd Mayweather ever was in terms of just public recognition, etc. Mayweather did incredible things in terms of numbers, pay-per-view records and all that. Broke all the records, made more money than anybody else. But he had a particular economic model that, you know, at the time of when he was boxing, wouldn't really have been possible when Mike Tyson was boxing, if that makes sense. So, yeah, anyway, Mike Tyson by a mile. Shout out to the Sweet Maths. Big up Jay Silver. He says, I remember a colleague saying Vidal Riley is the top 5 best he's sparred with as well. I was shocked. Personally, I'm not shocked because I have been saying for the longest time, I think Vidal Riley's very talented, very, very talented. The only thing I'm a little unsure about with Vidal Riley is whether he's got the heart. But in terms of overall ability, when Vidal Riley first turned pro, his career didn't get off to the fastest start because he was training YouTubers. I forget which YouTuber he used to train. Was it KSI or somebody? But anyway, his pro career didn't get off to the fastest start. And when he did box, his first couple of fights, he didn't look impressive to me at all. But as his career progressed, you could see he was getting better and better. I think he was rusty because there seemed to be quite a gap between his last amateur fight and then his first pro fight. Or at least he didn't fight that often when he initially turned pro. And so he was a little rusty. But once he got that rust off and got into a flow in his pro career, I started to be very impressed by what I saw. Because not only can he come forward and fight on the inside and throw big shots, but he's also got great movement, Vidal Riley. Great hand-eye coordination, great movement, etc. So I think he's very talented. But as I say, I don't know about the ticker, the heart. Because the way he fought Mikhail Lawal was, in my view, unnecessarily cautious. Now, subsequently, he said he had a injury or something in the fight. But yeah, Lawal is very limited, and Vidal Riley fought him like it was a prime Mike Tyson in there or something. You know what I mean? Like, it's only Lawal, bro. Like, you know, what's all the unnecessary caution about? You got to remember that Isaac Chamberlain basically bullied Mikhail Lawal for the whole fight, whatever it was, 10 or 12 rounds. And Chamberlain is not a big cruiserweight and he's not a big puncher. And somehow he was pushing Lawal back and bullying him the whole fight. And yet when Riley fought him, Riley was running around the ring and seemed scared to get hit and scared to engage. Make of that what you will. So that's the only reservation I have with Riley, is if the heart is there, you know. But shout out to Jay Silver. Shout out to Matt for the super chat. He says, if Ben can't stop Cameron, he's going to lose, period. Okay. Matt also says, yo, Jake Paul took my advice. He's fighting Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. Yeah, I saw that story. Jake Paul fighting Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. They're digging Chavez Jr. up again. How many times are they going to whip that dead horse? Chavez Jr. is a stoner. He's a waste man. And, when's the last time Chavez Jr. boxed? That guy was a punching bag the last time I saw him in the ring. Remember people like Andre Fonfara were beating him up and what have you? What a sad story. Danny says Italma's chin will be his Achilles heel. Well, we shall see. I haven't heard of any stories about him having a suspect chin, but maybe he's just that good that he doesn't get hit on it very often. We'll find out sooner or later. Shout out to Danny for the super chat. And as far as Ben Whittaker, if he can't stop Cameron, he's going to lose. I'm picking Whittaker to win the fight on points. Yeah, I think Whittaker's going to win on points. It's a 10-rounder. I don't think Liam Cameron is that good. He's tough. He's a vet, but his offensive skills are quite limited from what I've seen. And I think the first fight was more a matter of Ben Whittaker not being mentally prepared. There's one thing being physically prepared, but you have to be mentally prepared for a certain type of battle. I think he underestimated what type of battle it was going to be. And I also think that he might not travel very well. Yeah, some fighters need to be in their comfort zone to produce their best form. And it was a different environment for Ben Whittaker. He was in Saudi. He wasn't doing all this showboating. And to me, that was an indication that he wasn't comfortable. So, yeah, I think Ben Whittaker's going to win the fight on points. And in case anyone's not aware, that fight is taking place on Sunday. Not Saturday, Sunday. All right? So, yeah, we will watch with interest. Shout out to Matt. Okay, we'll get to some other comments and questions here. Seth says, Mike Tyson easily. Floyd's numbers were down to fighting on Mexican holidays. Keep it real. Big up, big up. Carlton Palmer says, Moses is for real. Mr. Lucas says, Moses looks unreal. But him and Warren need to keep their mouth shut fighting American rugby players. Zoe says, definitely Mike Tyson. Yeah, 100% Mike Tyson. Everybody knew Mike Tyson in the 80s, bro. He was just... Mike Tyson was... God, how can I describe him? He was like a superhero in real life. That's the way people saw him. It was way over the top, right? But the way people saw Mike Tyson, they literally saw him as an invincible man during his prime, yeah? They saw him as an invincible man. In or out of the ring. Right or wrong, that's how people looked at him. Dr. Wu says, remember when he visited Brixton? Of course. He got mobbed. There was too much love for Mike Tyson in Brixton. Shout out to Goozy. Shout out to Matt for the super chat. He says, Hatman, did you see Rolly Romero hitting the punching bag? Hysterical. I can post the link here for you to see. Yeah, please, post the link. I'll have a look at it now. Rolly is a weird guy. But one thing I can say about him is he can bang, for sure. He's definitely got power. Star Fox says, who is hated more, Tyson or Mayweather? Mayweather by a mile. Mayweather was never really loved outside of his hardcore fans, particularly in the States. Most people who tuned in to watch Mayweather fights were tuning in to see him lose in the hope that he would lose. Whereas Mike Tyson was massively loved. Pretty much all the way through. Aside from maybe towards the very end of his career, after the Holyfield bite fight, some people started to turn against Tyson at that stage. But up until that point, Mike Tyson was almost universally loved. The man was so popular, it was crazy. Seth says, Hatman, did you listen to the ODB album, Return to the 36 Chambers? Yeah, I remember when it came out. Very weird album. Hilarious album, right? But very weird. I want to say that was it the third Wu-Tang album to come out? The first Wu-Tang album, of course, was 36 Chambers. The second album, I want to say, was Tikal, Method Man's album. And then the third might have been ODB, Return to the 36 Chambers. It was definitely those three albums that came out first. I'm just not sure of the order of Method Man and ODB. But I want to say Meth came first and then it was ODB. BG London says, 80s and 90s, the three mics ruled the world. That's right. Jordan, Tyson, and Jackson. 100%. That's why Michael was such a popular name back then. Because the Michaels were absolutely killing it. Michael Jordan, Michael Jackson, and Mike Tyson. Jake says, Hatman, I remember an old video of yours saying you felt Roy Jones had the biggest feeling of invincibility around him in his prime in your view. Yeah, to me, he seemed like the most invincible fighter. Since that time, of course, I've dispensed with this notion of invincible fighters. I don't think there's such thing. But at the time, it seemed as though this guy was invincible because he was beating everybody so easily. Great fighters. Cloud says, I like Eddie Murphy's impressions of Tyson and Jackson. Yeah, Eddie Murphy was a great stand-up comedian. Fight Sport Talk says, Mayweather's cult are still very strong. These nutters lose their minds on these panels I'm on when I say he ducked plenty of fights. Yeah, I'm sure the cult is still strong, but it's relatively small. Mayweather was never really a popular fighter in terms of being liked. Whereas Mike Tyson, wildly popular. Both during his career and even now Mike Tyson is wildly popular. People from all walks of life, every color, every religion, every nationality, they love Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson fans do not fit a particular, ethnic or, regional demographic, even age demographic. Mike Tyson fans are from everywhere. Carlton Palmer says Liquid Sword's best Wu affiliated album. Well, that's a straight up Wu-Tang album. A Wu member. I mean, it's a Wu solo album. That's how I describe it. Yeah, Wu solo album. Affiliated, I would say, would be like Killer Priest. That's Wu affiliated. Or Sons of Man is Wu affiliated. But I know what you mean. I'm just being pedantic here. So apologies, Carlton Palmer. I know what you mean. Yeah, I like Liquid Swords as well. That's probably my favorite Wu solo album, or definitely one of them. I like the soundscape that RZA created for that album. Kind of ahead of its time. Using all the synthesizers and what have you. There was some samples on the album, but it was very synth heavy, which at the time was relatively rare, particularly for that type of hip-hop music. Shout out to Matt for the super chat. He says, I've got to say, people talk about George Kambosos getting 110% out of his skill set. Look at Rolly, he's gotten like 500% and made a fortune in boxing. That's true, but who's Rolly beaten? At least Kambosos has got a victory over one of the top guys in Teofimo Lopez. Rolly doesn't have that kind of victory. He's got a victory over old man Ishmael Barroso, which was extremely controversial. And he had his moments in certain fights, like against Tank Davis. But he doesn't have like one of them top wins. But yeah, he's definitely made plenty of money. Rolly Romero is a marketable, it's probably harsh to call him a punch bag, but he's a marketable opponent. Let's just put it that way. Shout out to David Campbell for the super chat. Big up, big up. Much appreciated, sir. Cloud says, we never talk about gaming or dating. I've spoken about both of those quite a bit in previous night flights, but we can talk about them for sure. Let's do it. Let's talk about gaming and dating again. I enjoyed the gaming show. In fact, it wasn't a night flight, but it was another live stream where we talked about gaming for most of it. Now, Rhubarb says, when did Jizz's Liquid Swords drop? I reckon it was about 95. Liquid Swords came out the same year as Only Built for Cuban Links. So I want to say it was 95. Only Built for Cuban Links was known as the purple tape because when you got it on cassette, the actual cassette tape was purple. Yeah. And I had it on cassette because CDs were, especially when you're a teenager and whatever, when they first came out in the 90s, they were kind of expensive. So initially you'd still be getting the tapes. And also it was easier to copy tapes. CD copying technology wasn't as easily accessible back then. Maybe towards the end of the 90s, early 2000s, you could copy CDs quite easily. But yeah, mid-90s, early mid-90s, it was still all about cassette tapes. And so Purple Tape came out 95. Liquid Swords came out the same year. And I was always like amazed by the artwork on those Wu-Tang albums. They always had great artwork. Liquid Swords had incredible artwork on the front. Only Built for Cuban Links. Enter the Wu-Tang, 36 Chambers, ODB. He had like some kind of welfare card or something on front of his album. David Campbell says, hey Hatman, you say that Alexander Usyk can't be considered one of the best heavyweights because his resume is too shallow, but do you consider him one of the best boxers of all time? Well, yeah, I said based on resume, you couldn't really rank Usyk, let's say top 5 because his resume isn't deep enough. But in terms of my perception of his ability and whether I think he could beat many of the great heavyweights of all time, the answer is yes. So, for example, in yesterday's live stream, somebody asked how I think Muhammad Ali would do in today's heavyweight era. And the answer I gave them is that, in my opinion, even though Muhammad Ali's got a better resume than Alexander Usyk, in my opinion, if those two were to fight in their prime, I'd be picking Usyk. People might want to come at me sideways for that, but I just think in that style matchup, I like Usyk in the fight. I'm not saying Usyk could necessarily have beaten everybody Ali beat, although he might have been able to. I just think styles make fights, and with that particular style matchup, I'll go with Usyk. So I rate Usyk incredibly highly. There is an argument, though, which you could make to put Usyk in the top 5 heavyweights of all time, and that is to say that the cruiserweight division didn't exist when Muhammad Ali was fighting. And many of the people that Ali did fight, by today's standards, would actually be cruiserweights. So if you take that into account, then maybe you could put Alexander Usyk right now in the top 5 heavyweights of all time. Do you know what I mean? Because Joe Frazier today would be a cruiserweight. Even Ali in the 60s at least would have been a cruiserweight. And many of the guys Ali fought would have been cruiserweights today. Ken Norton, for a certain period of his career, was not much above 200 pounds. So, yeah, if you take that into account, there might be a case for Usyk being top 5 based on resume, because his cruiserweight resume with his heavyweight resume combined is obviously a lot deeper than just his heavyweight resume alone. But shout out to David Campbell. Okay, we got a legendary Sheffield Don in the chat here. James Wood, big up. He says, looking forward to the Wilder fight to see Corey Barlow on the undercard. The fighting pride of Cleethorpes. Shout out to James Wood every time. The Sheffield Massive. Yes, yes. Deontay Wilder. Who's the guy he's fighting again? I forgot the guy's name. But Corey Barlow on the undercard. The fighting pride of... I need to look this up, unless I'm missing a reference here. Let me have a look. And I'll come on to the other super chats in a second. All right, yeah, he's fighting this guy called Tyrell Herndon. Okay, I'm missing the Corey Barlow reference, bro. You've lost me with that one. Shout out to Kayvon Green for the super chat. He says, the ball or the sword, you must decide. Yeah, that's one of the little kung fu clips that Wu-Tang were famous for, putting in their music. Shout out to Charles B. Charles B says, Hatman, do you think passport bros can lead to resentment from natives? That's a good question. And the answer is yes. Particularly depending on how passport bros behave, it can definitely lead to resentment from natives in many countries. You know, because a lot of these passport bros don't really give much respect or show much respect to the indigenous culture. And a lot of girls in these countries are attracted to foreigners because they think the foreigners have got money. And so those girls who are being so agreeable to foreigners, right, because you're coming with a British passport or American passport and whatever, and I mean, they know you're a foreigner when they look at you. But yeah, the girls who are being so agreeable towards you and so nice and everything towards you, they might not be treating their own men like that. Now, there are women in many of these countries that treat their own men great. Many of them, right? Especially in more rural areas. But in the cities, yeah, there are going to be those girls who, because they're very hypergamous, they're heading straight for the foreigners. I mean, Kenya's a place that is very big for that in particular. And there's definitely resentment among some Kenyan men, as I understand it, for sure. Copezilla's there talking about Kenya. He says, I've changed my Bumble dating location to Kenya, and within a few minutes, 30 matches, hot girls, all willing to meet. It was so surreal. They didn't understand UK dating, said it sounded weird. Yeah. And that is what you will find. Now, obviously, you need to use your discernment, because there are a lot of, not so much in Kenya, although there is a bit of it in Kenya, but in a lot of other African countries, it's even more extreme. And that is the presence of brasses, right? Hookers on the dating apps. There's a lot of them on those dating apps in many developing countries, okay? But you use your discernment. You should be able to tell from the stuff they've written on there and the way they're dressing, whether they're on the game or not. And just asking them a few questions, you should be able to weed out most of them. But yeah, still, in general, you talk to girls in developing countries, and never mind just the text conversation. When you talk to them on the phone, their whole demeanor is so different to talking to, let's say, girls in London or Manchester or, you know, most places in the United States. It's so different. They're not combative. You know, they stop and listen to what you're saying. They're polite. Yeah, 100%. Shout out to Matt for the super chat. He says, what are your thoughts on Keyshawn Davis versus Eden De Los Santos? the co-main of Mason versus Nakatalia. I'm not familiar with De Los Santos. I think you asked me about this on a previous stream, and I said I would go and look at him, but I don't think I've looked at him. I know Keyshawn Davis, obviously. I don't think I've looked at De Los Santos. Keyshawn Davis has been looking good of late, so I'll look into De Los Santos. Matt also says, also, have you been watching the WBC Grand Prix? Anyone you like in the bunch they've presented so far? Yeah, I watched a little bit of it yesterday. I didn't watch the stuff that was on today. It's on YouTube for those who don't know. Pretty low-level fights. I haven't seen anyone, at least not yesterday, that really impressed me. But we'll see as the tournament unfolds. Have you seen anyone, Matt, that impressed you so far? Seth says, don't be a passport bro in South Africa. You might get murked. Well, that's not the reason that you wouldn't want to be a passport bro. Well, that's one of the reasons, but South African women are not very agreeable, bro. You know, South Africa is not really the place you want to go if you're looking for nice, polite, you know, agreeable women. Nah. South African women are very heavily what's the right word? Feminism is massive among South African women. Massive. South African women are damn close to American women, like black American women, in their attitude and behavior and whatnot. So, yeah. Even though there's a lot of beautiful women in South Africa, the culture is far gone at this stage. Shout out to Kayvon Green for the super chat. He says, I got friends who are passport bros. People don't have the right expectations. The relationship is transactional. They expect to finance the family. Yeah, many of them do. But here's the thing. There are girls in these countries who are looking for foreigners. You understand? Those types of girls who go out there looking for foreigners are the types of girls that you don't want to be with. Yeah, if you're a passport bro. Don't hook up with, in terms of a relationship, the local girls who are looking for foreigners, who are targeting foreigners. Because it's definitely more, I mean, you could argue that for any woman anywhere in the world, it's a transactional relationship to some extent. There are very few women, in my experience, who will just love a man for who he is, and they don't care whether he's broke or what happens to him. They just, you know, heart to heart, they found their soulmate and they'll never leave him. That is a rare thing, right? Most women love conditionally, and it's a transactional thing to some extent. With some, it's to a greater extent. With some, it's to a lesser extent, but it's pretty much always transactional. But as I say, if you're a passport bro, be careful of the girls who target foreigners, because they tend to be the most greedy and cynical ones in their behavior. Set says, Hatman, what are your thoughts on Credo Mutwa and his tales and folklore? Very colorful and interesting. He's got a very charming, you know, Zulu accent, old school Zulu accent, and I mean, bizarre tales. Kai Jordan says, the New World was cold, bro. Very good song. Big up, Kai Jordan. For those who don't get the reference, he's talking about one of the tracks on here. This Rumble page, this Rumble channel is called The Bottomless Drink, and it's got some of my old mixtape tracks on there. And yeah, the track he is talking about is second from the left in the middle row, The New World. Old mixtape track from, what was it, 2018? 2018, 2019. Matt says Munguia Jr. isn't bad. I'd keep an eye on Munguia Jr., okay? From the WBC tournament. Fight Sport Talk says Bivol's ex-wife is definitely into passport bros. Chet Perry says South African women's bodies are agreeable with me. Yeah, they're beautiful. Some of the most beautiful women in Africa are in South Africa, but that's on the outside. On the inside, oh dear. That's all I can tell you. Oh dear. David says Mosqueda looks unreal in the Grand Prix. Don't think I've seen him. Did you see him, Matt? Did you see Mosqueda in the Grand Prix, in the WBC Grand Prix tournament? The Celtic Magician says Jake Paul will beat Chavez Jr. Yeah, I have to imagine he will. Chavez Jr. been out the ring a long time. He was the ultimate weight bully. He got beat up a bag of times. He quit a bag of times. So Jake Paul, who has been active, he should have enough to be able to deal with Chavez Jr. at this stage. Mark Brown says, recently read Hitler's book, Mein Kampf. Yeah, I actually have the audio version of Mein Kampf, believe it or not. The audio book version. Yeah, I wanted to hear what he had to say. Shout out to Danny for the super chat. He says, a lot of Latinas value your passport. Yeah, but, you know, it's the same the world over, really. Women are hypergamous wherever you go. And that dynamic will meet you when you go to a country which is economically a lot weaker than the country you're coming from. So if you're an average earner in the UK and women are giving you the cold shoulder, as soon as you step off the plane in Thailand or Cambodia or Kenya, all of a sudden, you're in the top 30% of earners in that country, or even top 20 or 10%. And the women will treat you accordingly, you know, because they're hypergamous. Matt says, we love women from Thailand. Just kidding. I was going to say, as long as they're actually women, you know? Gotta be careful out there, bro. Danny says, I was listening to some Latinas speaking at a podcast and they always joke about the value of gringos' passports when speaking about dating. Yeah, and like I say, there are girls, Latinas and, you know, girls in all countries who make it their mission to go after foreigners. And those are the girls you need to stay away from. The girls you need to go for are the homely girls who are not out and about in bars and nightclubs looking for foreigners. The girls who are going to church and going home and helping their family and stuff like that, and their sister's married and their parents are married and everyone around them is married. Those are the girls you need to be going for. And there's plenty of them in most developing countries. Plenty of them. They're everywhere. This is why I say, okay, Reflex One, you've yeah, you're not going to spam like that. That's not happening. If you want a comment guaranteed read out, send a super chat. Let's get you out of here. You're not going to spam the chat like that. That's not happening. Shout out to Kieran. He says, Hatman, me and my missus are looking to relocate our family to Dubai in 2027. As you're someone who's lived in the Middle East, have you got any advice for me? Love the content, bro. I lived out there many, many moons ago when it wasn't as busy as it is now, when it wasn't as overpopulated. I mean, it was overpopulated even then, but even more so now, particularly with people from the West. When I was living there, it had a bit more of a family vibe, which I personally preferred. Now it's got a much younger demographic and, you know, a lot more people from the West and what have you. What advice could I give? Let me think now. Because Dubai has so many Western people living there now. And you're going there with a family, right? You're moving there 2027. So you're not going to be doing any partying or any silly stuff. And since it's got so many it's almost like a de facto Western country. Obviously the laws are different, but if you're a family man, you're not going to be flouting any of the laws. I mean, I'm not sure what they're like now with holding hands in public, because back then they still didn't like it. If you're holding hands with your woman in public, they didn't like it back then. I don't know about now. Just enjoy, you know. It's not the place I would necessarily want to raise a family, but there are advantages to doing so. It's safe. You know, it's much lower crime than any big city in certainly Britain and most places in the West. The weather's nice year round. I mean, in summer it does get insanely hot, but AC is ubiquitous everywhere in Dubai. Everywhere has incredible AC. So that's not really a problem unless you're actually going outside. You know, your car's going to have incredible AC. Every place you stay, every mall, every shop you go into, AC everywhere. They've even got AC on the street in certain parts of Dubai. They've got AC outside, bro. You go to certain bars and restaurants and you're sitting on like a balcony patio thing, whatever, and they've got AC outside. So you don't even need to really worry about the heat. So yeah, and obviously, if you are working for a company, it's tax-free. So that's one of the big advantages. That's one of the reasons that people move out there. They don't want to pay income tax. And that's a massive advantage, certainly if you are, even if you're single, but more so if you have a family. All that extra money, the extra disposable income from not having to pay income tax. Cobzilla says, Dubai isn't what you think. The air quality is shocking as well. Yeah, the air quality is terrible. That I can say. The air quality is terrible for 3 reasons. Number one, it's very busy. So just like any big city, you're going to have pollution from cars. And there, because petrol is so cheap in the Middle East, people drive enormous cars. You know, like America, where seeing cars that are like 5-6 liter engines is pretty common. Right? So that, you know, all kind of gas guzzler cars putting out all sorts of pollution. On top of that, it's hot. And so because it's hot, it traps or it feels like it traps anyway, a lot of the pollution lower down in the atmosphere between the buildings, right? That affects the air quality. And also, there's a lot of dust in the atmosphere because you are in the middle of a desert. Some days when there's a bit of wind, dust will kick up. So you've got dust, you've got pollution, you got heat. I'm not selling it very well here, but yeah, look, there are positives and negatives to everywhere. But yeah, the air quality in Dubai, in the middle of the city, is not great. On the outskirts of the city is a lot better. A lot better. Yeah? But in the middle of the city, yeah, the air quality is not great. Shout out to Danny for the super chat. He says, Hatman, your channel is the best boxing channel on YouTube. I've been tuning in to your channel for a while. Please keep doing these videos. Your analysis is unbiased and intelligent. Thank you, Danny. Much appreciated. Really appreciate the super chat. Thank you for the kind words. I will do my best. Shout out to Matt for the super chat. He says, Hatman, by the way, BKFC Omaha is starting soon. If you ever want to watch it, highly recommend. It's an absolute blast. The KOs are amazing entertainment. Yeah, I do watch BKFC from time to time. Not on a regular basis, but I do watch some of the fights. I saw that ex-UFC guy get knocked out by one of the BKFC champions. A big black guy who I think he also used to play American football, but he was in UFC for a while. Forget the guy's name. Big black guy with dreads. I saw him get knocked out in BKFC, I want to say sometime last year. Anybody know who I'm talking about? Greg Hardy, thank you. That's right, Greg Hardy. AJ14 says, may sound silly, but I would be nervous about getting into bother or arrested for the smallest things living in Dubai. Yeah, I wasn't worried about any of that, and I never had any problems because I'm a socially conservative person anyway. You know, I'm not the kind of person that's going to be out, lipsing somebody in the street or drunk and disorderly or trying to get hold of some puff or whatever the case may be, weed, I'm not going to be doing any of those things. So I wasn't the least bit concerned about falling foul of the law or what have you. The people who tend to get in trouble are the people who go over there thinking that, they can continue. They think it's Magaluf or something, and it's not Magaluf. I think it's like Magaluf or Ayanapa. No, you can't be coming with Ayanapa Magaluf energy in Dubai. You get yourself in trouble. But I've never had that type of energy, so I never had any problems whatsoever. Shout out to David Campbell for the super chat. Matt says, I joined your brotherhood. Is there a brotherhood Discord? There's a brotherhood element group. I actually got banned from Discord. Discord's too woke. They banned me. So I've been on Element for the past few years. And Element is completely encrypted. If you, in fact, I'm going to put a post up. And if you just add in fact, I'll explain it all in the post that I'm going to put up. After this stream, I'll put a post up on Patreon, and it will give instructions of how to sign up for the Element group. It's free, right? You just have to download the app from element.io. You download the app from there, and then in the post, I'll give you instructions of just, post your username, and then I'll add you to the Element group. Element is very similar to Discord. Very similar to Discord. But it's fully encrypted because Discord is not encrypted, and that's why I got banned. I don't know what they banned me for. Saying something that could be construed as mildly offensive, because I never say anything crazy. Even in private conversations, even on Discord, I never said anything like, against any particular group that was like really never. But Discord are so woke and left-wing and censorship happy that it could have been anything, could have been done anything. They didn't tell me what they banned me for, but they banned me a couple years back. And to be fair, I knew that Discord were like that because they were banning other people. And so in my head, I was already thinking, where can I go except, other than Discord? Because these lot, this platform is not the place to be long term. So when I did get banned, I wasn't really bothered. I was like, I wanted to go on Element anyway. So. Kylie says, don't be coming with that Johnny Vegas energy in Dubai. Yeah, so I'll put the post up after the live stream, Matt, and if you just post your Element username in the comments, I'll add you to the group. Danny says, shout out to Danny for the super chat. Shout out to Dave Campbell if I didn't already. Danny says, are Western women more promiscuous than Latinas? I want to say overall, yes. But, and I have to put a but, it depends which Western countries you're talking about. You know? If you're talking about the UK, then I would say yes. But you look at somewhere like Spain, some of the Mediterranean countries, Greece, Italy, the women in those countries are not as promiscuous. At least that's my perception. They're not as promiscuous as, let's say, Swedish girls, French girls, British girls, you know? So there are certain parts, there are certain Western countries where girls are not, in my estimation anyway, in my perception, they're not that promiscuous, relatively speaking. Yeah, BG says the Marbella mentality will get you locked up in Dubai. It definitely will. Don't go over there thinking it's Marbella or Magaluf or Ayia Napa. Get yourself in trouble. And you'd think it'd just be common sense, but certain man, I don't know where their brain is. Certain people don't think. And they go over there, not minding their P's and Q's, and they wind up in a whole heap of trouble. Copezilla says, the UK is absolutely cooked with dating, and now the women complain men ain't approaching or playing to their games on apps. Yeah, dating apps are terrible now in the West compared to even 10 years ago. 10 years ago, using dating apps in the UK was actually not too bad, but now, forget about it. I'm telling you now, forget about it. Useless now. Matt says, I went to Nigeria and got robbed leaving the airport. Well, the question I would ask is, why did you go to Nigeria? Nobody goes there, bro. Even most Nigerians don't go to Nigeria. Why did you go to Nigeria? I would never go there. Matt says, I always got cheated on. It's a statistical fact that it's easier for women to find a man than for a man to find a woman. Yeah, that's facts. There's no debate about it. I completely agree. Copezilla says, don't go to Nigeria. It's like London. You'll get done in. Oh, Nigeria is nothing like London. Nigeria is far more dangerous. London is like Disneyland compared to Nigeria, bro. Anywhere like Lagos, Abuja apparently is not quite so dangerous or whatever, but yeah. Nigeria is far more dangerous than anywhere in the UK. Says, Hatman, have you ever heard of the musician Tina Marie? No. Shout out to Dave Campbell. He says, who do you think would beat Usyk past or present? I'd probably pick a prime Mike Tyson over Usyk, but not with much confidence because I never saw Mike Tyson fight a southpaw. But I'm judging this partly on Derek Chisora's performance against Usyk, because he did have some success in the early rounds, rushing Usyk and making him uncomfortable. Mike Tyson so much faster than Derek Chisora, so much more accurate, so much more consistent. So in a style matchup, I might pick a prime Tyson over Usyk, but who knows? Matt says, I went to the Seattle residences in Spa in Nigeria. It was actually amazing. The sunset in Africa is one of the nicest I've seen. You can see every single star. The animals, dangerous but majestic. Yeah, but you can see those things in so many other countries in Africa that are far more accommodating and safe. Why did you choose Nigeria specifically? I'm curious. Because it's not a popular tourist destination. Most people who go to West Africa, they go to Ghana. Ghana, which is right next door to Nigeria, is far more popular because it's safer. It's more tourist friendly. So Nigeria, that's a wild place to go. If you want to go to Africa, it's wild. Okay. Oh, I see. Your ex-girlfriend's parents lived there. Okay. So we visited. I see. So you did have some reason to go there. Because, yeah, it's not the kind of place that you would just pick if you didn't have people living there that you're going to go visit. Nigeria is not that kind of place. Cobzilla says, the average woman gets more likes than a celebrity man. That's what we're dealing with. I've seen girls Tinder and she has like 1K likes in 1 week and she was average too. Yeah, that's what it is. The game's all out of whack. It's all out of whack. And that's why when you go to a developing country where a lot of the girls, the percentage of girls in developing countries that are on Instagram or have big Instagram followings and that are on dating apps is much smaller in developing countries for the most part, way smaller. And so the dating scene is more like it was, let's say, 20 years ago in the West, in these places, where girls are more appreciative of attention. I'm generalizing here, but that's generally how it is. Warrior Poet, shout out for the super chat. He says, how did you learn to read people from the face? How did I learn to read people from the face? It's really just an intuitive thing. It's something that you learn subconsciously throughout life. And some people are better at it innately than others. You know, some people will look at a person who's giving off really suspicious body language and they won't be able to pick up on it, but other people will. Some people are just more intuitive. It's not something that I consciously try to develop, the ability to look at someone and assess them quickly. I think it's something I always had to some extent since I was a kid. Not that I'm any kind of clairvoyant or anything, I'm definitely not. But I want to say I'm relatively good at reading people's body language and reading between the lines and the stuff that they say. I like to think I'm relatively good at that. Shout out to AJ14 for the super chat. He says, I'm exactly like you, very conservative, especially socially. But you see those horror stories, bloke arrested for slipping over and falling into a guy, then arrested and in all sorts of bother. I've seen horror stories like that, but I've never heard, I never met anybody or spoke to anyone that was involved in anything. All I can tell you is the one piece of advice I'll tell you is, yeah, definitely don't get into fights. Don't touch people. You know, like when you are in the UK, in any Western country, you might be moving through a crowded bar and you'll touch people on the shoulder and stuff like. Don't do that. Keep your hands to yourself. Yeah? And definitely don't quarrel or argue with the locals. Yeah, the Arabs, don't argue with them, don't quarrel with them, because that will get you in trouble. And if you do get into any kind of argument or confrontation or, you know, whatever, don't start swearing. So I'll give you those bits of advice. But shout out to AJ14. Matt says, the truth of the matter is, we're pawns in a big game. Just remember, women have options. Will always be looked over. If a woman finds an opportunity to find another man, she will, because they are vast and everywhere. But for us men, we are ants in an anthill. That's why I stopped using Tinder. It sounds like you need to leave the West, Matt. That's what it sounds like, because it is that bad for a lot of men in the West. Sounds like you got to get out. Because trust me, if you go to many developing countries, the attitude is very different, and all of a sudden you'll feel valued again. Danny says, have you ever delved into the dark arts? No, I haven't. I don't like messing with things that I don't fully understand. I guess by the dark arts, you mean like witchcraft, sorcery? No. Kayvon Green says, nonsense, get to the top 20% and it's a free-for-all. Most men cannot get to the top 20% in the West. It's too difficult. So it's not really a solution. If every man could get to the top 20%, then the top 20% wouldn't be the top 20%. Do you know what I mean? So the vast majority of men are never going to be able to get into the top 20% of earners. A more realistic thing for them to do is to leave the West, leave the country, and then all of a sudden they are in the top 20% in a poorer country. So, yeah, you got to get out if it's not working in the West. Got to get out. Matt says, I used to use a voice changer to talk to people in video games because people will take you more seriously than if you have a more feminine voice. Okay. Shout out to Matt. He says, just having a more masculine sounding voice has made it easier for people to be friendly to me. Just how you sound can change people's psychology. Yeah, that's true. Women generally prefer men with deeper voices and what have you, 100%. JR says, I know you love a good mystery, Hatman. What are your thoughts on the Bermuda Triangle? Some interesting cases. Yeah, some very interesting cases. And I had my own experience with the Bermuda Triangle. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I had my own experience with the Bermuda Triangle. I'm not even going to lie to you. Could it have been my mind playing tricks on me? Yes. It wasn't anything too spooky. But I was flying through the Bermuda Triangle. And the flight was like 11 hours, maybe. 11-hour flight, something like that. Or was it 10 hours? 10 or 11-hour flight. And the flight was moving quite quick. as quick as you would expect, because I've been that route many times, right? Back and forth to the Caribbean and whatnot from the UK many times. But on this particular occasion, because you don't always go through the Bermuda Triangle, but on this particular occasion, we did fly through the Bermuda Triangle. And as soon as we got into the Bermuda Triangle, I wasn't thinking about this at the time, But, because, you can look at the little map and you find out where you are when you're on the plane on the screen. And all of a sudden, it was as if the plane journey was never ending. Because it was only like an extra, couple of hours to the destination. But somehow the time felt like it dragged on for 5-6 hours. I was walking up and down the aisle because I was so just tired sitting in the seat, finding different things. It was the most bizarre experience ever. And it wasn't just me. My girlfriend at the time noticed it as well. It was weird. We're like, how is this journey dragging on for this long? It's crazy. You'd look at the map and we're barely moving. And so, yeah, nothing too bizarre or out there. But when we went through the Bermuda Triangle that time, it was as if we were stuck in time or something. And the clock was barely moving, or time was moving far slower than normal. Yeah, that's all I can tell you. On the way back, the journey time was actually longer, but it felt much faster. And again, I've flown that route or a similar route many, many times. And I've never been on a flight that felt like it took that long. It was bizarre. Was it just my mind? Was it... Because perception of time is very variable. If you're really enjoying yourself, time appears to move really quick. If you're bored, or if you're in a situation that you don't like, time can move really slow. I get that. But I've flown on many planes, and I've flown back and forth from the UK to the Caribbean and Latin America and what have you. And only that time when we flew through the Bermuda Triangle on that particular occasion, did time appear to slow down to the point where it was like, what in the world is going on here? Yeah. It was very strange. Shout out to Matt for the super chat. He says, K218B, thoughts on it? If there are similar compounds in their oxygen, does that mean there will be similar organisms on Earth? K218B. Is that one of the moons of Saturn or something? Let me look that up. Matt coming with the scientific terms here. Let's have a look at what this is. Okay, so this is a recent story. I wasn't even aware of this story. I don't really watch the news. K218b, also known as EPIC, and it's got a bunch of numbers, is an exoplanet orbiting the red dwarf K218, located 124 light years away from Earth. All right. Cambridge researchers find strongest evidence yet of life on distant exoplanet. First I've heard of it. Like I said, I don't watch the news. Initially discovered with the Kepler Space Telescope, it was later observed by James Webb Space Telescope in order to study the planet's atmosphere. In 2019, the presence of water vapor in K218's atmosphere was reported, drawing scientific attention to this system. In 2023, they detected carbon dioxide and methane in the atmosphere of K218b. In 2025, the atmosphere of K218b was found to contain dimethyl sulfide, a chemical that could serve as a biomarker on exoplanets in quantities 20 times higher than on Earth. As the molecule is short-lived, the concentration is highly suggestive that DMS is being replenished Other scientists criticize this statement and point to lab experiments that can produce DMS without life. Okay. Yeah, first I've read about this. What do you think about it, Matt? You think they're going to tell us that there's life living there, as in intelligent life? Are they going to disclose? "124 light years, yes." It's very far. But during the 1990s, I've spoken about this before. Copezilla says it has life on it. Well, does it have intelligent life? That's the thing. During the 1990s, when aliens were all the rage and the X-Files was a big show and all this type of stuff, you'd often hear these scientists appear on mainstream shows. And they would ask them, is it possible that aliens are visiting Earth? And the scientists would always say, well, the nearest galaxy where life is thought to possibly exist is however many light years away. And so even if the aliens could travel close to the speed of light, it would take them millions of years to get here. Therefore, it's impossible. And I always found that, even then, to be the most idiotic answer imaginable, because it assumes that an intelligent life form that could be, I don't know, millions of years more advanced than us would have the same level of technology that we do and the same understanding of physics and physics and what have you as we do. All of these laws of physics shouldn't even be called laws. They're laws as we understand the nature of reality today. But everything in science should always be provisional. Because there were things 200 years ago, 400 years ago, that scientists and before that alchemists thought were absolutely set in stone, right? But they went on to be disproved. So this assumption that, other intelligent life forms in the universe will be bound by the so-called laws of physics is just nonsensical. It's nonsensical. There could be life forms out there that are literally millions of years ahead of us scientifically and technologically. Maybe they can pass through wormholes. Maybe they've got, an understanding of physics and reality that we can't even comprehend. So traveling vast distances is a doddle for them. It's idiotic to judge what is possible based upon what we can do now. That's just stupid as hell. Unbelievably stupid. Shout out to Danny for the super chat. He says, simps are complicit in the demise of romance. Without their contribution, the egos of modern women wouldn't be where it's at. They're accountable. Of course, simps are cancer. Simps are the scourge of the dating scene in the West. They're terrible. Star Fox says, why haven't they popped over for a cuppa already then? Well, the universe is a vast place. Maybe they haven't discovered the Earth, or maybe they have popped over for a cuppa, for all I know. I don't know. Who knows? And then there's the possibility of interdimensional beings, which is kind of a more popular idea these days than beings coming from the other side of the universe. Now people are more entertaining the possibility that UFOs and whatnot are actually craft that allow you to traverse dimensions. Meaning that there could be versions of this earth where there are alien beings or whatever, and they, as I say, traverse using these craft. That's one idea that people are entertaining. Matt says human beings creating laws that realistically cannot be proven because everything we've ever made is on our understanding, not the truth. Indeed. Exactly that. Matt says, the universe is so unfathomably massive, we will never be visited. Albie Reynolds says, I don't think we are an interesting and developed enough species for extraterrestrial life to be interested in or bother exploring. I'm not sure why you would think that, because there may be loads of extraterrestrial life out there at different stages of their evolution. And if we take our behavior as an example, scientists are still, even now, going out into jungles, turning over rocks and stuff like that, and taking specimens of undiscovered insects and whatnot, taking them back to the lab and doing experiments and what have you. So if our species is anything to go by, then I wouldn't necessarily think that that would be true. That an advanced alien race wouldn't be interested in us. Maybe they'd be very interested. Maybe going out into space for them is like when our scientists go out into the jungle, you know? Looking for undiscovered species and whatnot. Matt says if the Big Bang is true, that would mean that we're all kind of at the same stage of our existence, correct? No, that's not correct, because the planets didn't all form at the same time coming out of the Big Bang. There's supposed to be, right, according to science, enormous differences in the amount of time that some planets and some stars, etc., some galaxies were formed compared to others. I mean, the Big Bang is a weird, mind-bending theory, but if it were true, yeah, the planets didn't all form at the same time. It all occurred over the space of, I don't know, billions of years. From the initial Big Bang, I'm not saying I necessarily subscribe to this theory, but, you know, the Big Bang theory, but that's the way it's described. From the initial burst of energy out of nothing, somehow, this set a bunch of chemical reactions in motion. And then over the course of several billion years, these chemical reactions and electricity and all this stuff started forming planets and stars and galaxy and so on and so forth. It's only the initial bang that was instantaneous. The rest of it supposedly took billions of years. Shout out to AJ14 for the super chat. He says, did you ever Jeremy Beadle, or C, I guess he meant to say the Jeremy Beadle alien prank? Lady thought one had landed in her garden, police and professors everywhere. First thing she asked it was, would you like a cup of tea? Yeah, I remember that from back in the days. I remember that from back in the days. But it looked so hokey. It looked so cheesy. I was like, how could that old woman really be fooled by that? But some people are incredibly naive. Then again, maybe she knew it was some type of TV prank. I don't know. But yeah, I do remember that. I remember that one. Then Jeremy Beadle pops out with his little hand. I mean, Jeremy Beadle, damn near an alien. Vincent says, is it more terrifying to think that we are alone or that the universe is populated with other species? I want to say it's more terrifying to think the universe is populated with other species. Because being alone in the universe is not like we can leave anyway, right? Most human beings can't leave this place. So what difference does it make if there's nobody else out there? Can't leave anyway, you know? Whereas if there are other things out there that can get here, then there's a threat. But I do find it quite interesting that all of a sudden, over the past few years, these topics have become mainstream to the point where people are entertaining them seriously rather than just laughing at them. And that's because the mainstream media has changed its tune. They don't ridicule this stuff as much as they used to. And that kind of makes me suspicious, you know? Because for the longest time, it was just a subject of ridicule. But now all of a sudden, they're taking UFOs or UAPs, as they call them now, seriously. And it's like, what are they up to? Shout out to Swaggins for the super chat. He says, what were Eubank Sr.'s best boxing attributes? And how does he rank, in your opinion, amongst the other great middleweights? Eubank Sr.'s best attributes were definitely his chin and heart. He had a good jab. He had good movement. Yeah, he was light on his feet and he could move around the ring and whatnot, and he'd pop you with the jab. He had a good boxing brain. Defensively, he was good if he could keep you at long range, and he often would fight entire 12-round contests on the back foot moving around the ring. But if you managed to pin him down, his defense on the inside at mid and close range was quite poor. He wasn't really good up close at slipping and blocking and firing back once you closed him down. And that's why he needed to have that great chin that he had. But yeah, he had good legs. He could move around. He had really long arms and he'd pop you with that jab. Very long arms for his height. I don't know what his reach was, but reach and arm length are different measurements. Eubank Sr. certainly appeared to have much longer arms than his son. The reach measurement might be similar, but the arm length measurement, I'm sure, was much longer for Eubank Sr. And so, yeah, he was a lot more effective at long range than his son. Eubank Sr. liked long range boxing. Even against taller guys, he'd be doing very well at long range a lot of the time. So yeah, they're his attributes when he was in his prime. As far as where do I rank him among the great middleweights, not particularly highly. He grabbed hold of that WBO belt when it wasn't seen as a legitimate sanctioning body at the time. And he and Barry Hearn milked that belt at 160 pounds and later on 168 pounds against a series of miscellaneous opponents. Occasionally there were some good opponents in there, definitely. Obviously Nigel Benn. There was also Graziano Rocchigiani. He was a good fighter based in Germany. He was like half Italian, half German. He was a very good fighter. And there were various others, right? But the majority of Eubank Sr.'s title run was miscellaneous opposition. Yeah. Oh, yes, it was. And so I can't rank him very highly. Does he even crack the top 10 at middleweight? Probably not. At super middleweight, I don't know. Anyway, yeah, that's my take on Eubank Sr. Shout out to Swaggins. Matt says, do you believe human beings will eventually nuke ourselves to death or make ourselves extinct? No, I don't think so. I don't think so. Because nobody benefits, right? Where's the benefit in engaging in a nuclear war? A shout out to Matt for the super chat. He says, do you think they're preparing us for a quote-unquote invasion? Well, you know, it's a possibility, a fake invasion using holographic technology and whatnot. I mean, the ruling class in this world have pulled off so many scams and all sorts of nonsense on an incredible scale. It wouldn't surprise me if they tried to pull that one off at some point, you know. A fake alien invasion. It wouldn't surprise me. There was the famous Ronald Reagan speech, I think from the 80s, where he said, imagine if there was some alien threat, how we would all drop our differences and this, that, and the other. Shout out to Danny for the super chat. He says, Usyk is as great a boxer as there ever was. Mike struggled stopping people after 5 rounds or so, and Usyk has never been down, so it's hard to predict. Yeah, but styles make fights. Usyk was never in there with anyone like Mike Tyson. And again, Derek Chisora did give Usyk problems early on, and Mike Tyson wouldn't necessarily have to stop Usyk to beat him. I mean, Myris Breedis pushed Usyk close. That was a close fight against Myris Breedis. So Mike Tyson wouldn't necessarily have to stop him. Mike Tyson did win fights on points. He beat Bone Crusher Smith on points. He beat Tony Tucker on points. He beat James Tillis, Mitch Green on points. But it is a tough fight to predict, for sure. Michael Merck says, do you believe in the moon landing? I tend to suspect that yes, man has been on the moon. This might not be a popular take. I'm sure it isn't, but as far as the Apollo missions, I think that they did go to the moon, or I suspect that they did, but that they also faked some of the video footage, possibly all of it, for reasons of national security, because at the time they were competing with the Soviet Union and other countries who had designs on going to space and going to the moon. And I don't think they would have wanted their enemies or potential enemies to be able to back engineer their technology. So for that reason, I suspect that some, possibly a lot, who knows, maybe even all of the footage and pictures and whatnot were faked for public consumption, so that, like I say, their enemies couldn't back engineer the technology by looking at it and studying the footage. But I suspect they did go. Do I know it for certain? Am I 100% confident? No, but I suspect they did. What I find a more interesting concept is that what if they went to the moon and they saw things there that they weren't ready to see? You know, like in the film 2001: A Space Odyssey, where they find the monolith on the moon? What if they actually went to the moon and saw something like that there? Ming says monolith on the moon, yes. Stanley Kubrick, Space Odyssey 2001 style. Because, when the astronauts, let's just for a second entertain that they did go there, right? It's the 1960s. They would have had no idea if there's actually extraterrestrials up there or not. For all they knew, there could have been. Do you know what I mean? It was a different time. Humanity didn't have this know-it-all attitude in the 60s that it has today. So there must have been some trepidation among the astronauts and even the scientists on the ground about what they would find up there. All right, peeps, I'm going to draw the curtain on this live stream. It's been a blast as usual. It's been a great conversation. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed it too. Special shout out to everyone who donated via Super Chat. Make sure you guys all have a great evening, day, if it's still day wherever you are. Great weekend. I'm sure I'll be doing other streams this weekend. Certainly for the fight on Sunday, I'll probably stream. So until then, as I always like to say, take it easy. And if you get it easy the first time, get it again. I'm out. And shout out to Striker for that last super chat. Big up, Striker.